The Coast Guard stopped the boat, but when the captain revealed his name, everyone stepped back. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Pacific Ocean as Coast Guard cutter Vigilant cut through the choppy waters off the California coast. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez stood on the bridge, her experienced eyes scanning the horizon through high-powered binoculars. After 15 years of service, she had seen everything from drug smuggling operations to desperate refugees attempting dangerous crossings. Her radio crackled to life. "Commander, we have a vessel approaching from the southwest. Small fishing boat, appears to be moving erratically." Martinez lowered her binoculars and moved to the radar display. The blip on the screen showed a vessel roughly 2 miles out, moving in an unusual zigzag pattern that immediately raised red flags. In her experience, boats moved like this for only a few reasons: mechanical problems, inexperienced operators, or deliberate attempts to avoid detection. "All stations, this is the bridge," Martinez announced over the ship's intercom. "We have a potential intercept situation. Prepare for boarding operations." The Vigilant's crew sprang into action with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Petty Officer Rodriguez began checking the rigid inflatable boat, while Seaman Johnson gathered the boarding party's equipment. These routine stops were part of their daily mission, protecting American waters from everything from illegal fishing to human trafficking. As they approached the suspicious vessel, Martinez could see it was an old fishing boat, maybe 30 feet long, with peeling paint and rust stains along its hull. The name Maria Elena was barely visible on the stern. What caught her attention, however, was the way the boat suddenly straightened its course and began moving directly toward shore at maximum speed. "Suspicious vessel? This is the United States Coast Guard," Martinez announced over the loudspeaker. "Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded for routine inspection." The fishing boat continued its desperate rush toward shore, black smoke pouring from its aging engine. Martinez had seen this before. Smugglers often tried to reach the 3-mile limit where they believed they would be safe from Coast Guard jurisdiction. What they didn't realize was that the Coast Guard had authority to pursue vessels that had violated U.S. laws, regardless of their location. "Fire a warning shot across their bow," Martinez ordered. The sharp crack of the .50 caliber machine gun echoed across the water, and a splash appeared 50 yards ahead of the fleeing vessel. Almost immediately, the fishing boat began to slow, its engine sputtering to a stop. As the Vigilant pulled alongside, Martinez could see 3 men on deck. 2 appeared to be typical crew members, wearing old work clothes and looking nervous. But the third man, standing calmly at the wheel, was different. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and wearing a clean white shirt that seemed out of place on the weathered fishing vessel. "Boarding party, prepare for deployment," Martinez commanded. Rodriguez and his team lowered the rigid inflatable boat into the water and sped toward the Maria Elena. Martinez watched through binoculars as her crew expertly maneuvered alongside the fishing boat and climbed aboard. "Bridge, this is Rodriguez," came the voice over the radio. "We're aboard the vessel. 3 males as previously observed, requesting permission to begin inspection." "Permission granted. Standard inspection protocol." Martinez continued watching as her crew began their methodical search. They were looking for anything suspicious: drugs, weapons, illegal immigrants, or violations of fishing regulations. The 2 younger crew members stood nervously to one side, but the older man remained calm, his hands clasped behind his back as he observed the proceedings. 20 minutes into the inspection, Rodriguez's voice came over the radio again, but this time, there was something different in his tone. "Commander, we need you to come aboard. There's something you need to see." Martinez felt a familiar tingle of anticipation. In her 15 years of service, she had learned to trust her crew's instincts. When an experienced petty officer said she needed to see something personally, it was usually important. "Johnson, you have the bridge," she ordered. "I'm going aboard the suspect vessel." Minutes later, Martinez found herself standing on the deck of the Maria Elena, facing the three men. The two crew members still looked nervous, constantly glancing at their captain as if seeking guidance. But the older man maintained his composure, meeting her gaze directly with calm, intelligent eyes. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly, "we found approximately 50 kilograms of what appears to be cocaine hidden in the fish hold. But that's not the unusual part." Martinez raised an eyebrow. 50 kilograms of cocaine was certainly significant, but hardly unprecedented in these waters. Drug smugglers regularly attempted to move large quantities through the shipping lanes off California. "What's the unusual part, Rodriguez?" "The captain, ma'am. When we asked for identification, he provided this." Rodriguez handed her a waterproof wallet containing several documents. Martinez opened the wallet and examined the identification cards inside. Her eyes widened as she read the name on the documents. She looked up at the older man, then back down at the ID, then up again. "Sir," she said carefully, "according to these documents, your name is Captain Miguel Santos?" The man nodded calmly. "That is correct, Commander." Martinez felt her heart rate increase. The name Miguel Santos was legendary in Coast Guard circles, though for reasons that had nothing to do with drug smuggling. She had heard the stories during her training and again throughout her career, but she had never expected to meet the man himself under these circumstances. "Rodriguez," she said quietly, "I need you to step back and give us some space." Her crew member looked confused but followed orders, moving toward the bow of the boat where the other two suspects were being held. Martinez studied the man's face more carefully. Despite the years that had passed, she could see the resemblance to the photographs she had seen in Coast Guard training materials. The same intelligent eyes, the same bearing that spoke of command authority, even in these circumstances. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "are you the same Miguel Santos who commanded the cutter Resolute during the Hurricane Elena rescue operation in 1985? The older man's expression softened slightly, and for the first time since the boarding began, he smiled. "Commander, that was a very long time ago. I'm surprised anyone still remembers that operation." Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. Every Coast Guard officer knew the story of the Hurricane Elena rescue. It was taught in academies as an example of extraordinary heroism and seamanship. Captain Miguel Santos had risked his ship and crew to rescue 200 people from a sinking cruise ship in conditions that should have made the rescue impossible. "Sir, what are you doing on this boat?" Martinez asked, her mind racing to understand how a decorated Coast Guard hero could end up as captain of a drug-smuggling vessel. Santos looked out toward the horizon for a moment before answering. "Commander, that is a very complicated question with a very complicated answer, but I give you my word that things are not what they appear to be." Martinez felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. She was facing one of the most respected names in Coast Guard history, a man whose actions had saved hundreds of lives and earned him the Coast Guard Medal, the service's highest decoration for heroism. Yet here he was, apparently caught red-handed smuggling drugs. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to explain yourself, because right now, I have 50 kilograms of cocaine on your vessel and 3 suspects in custody." Santos nodded slowly. "Commander, I understand your position, and I respect the duty you're performing. But I need to ask you something first. Are you familiar with the current status of Operation Neptune's Web?" Martinez blinked in surprise. Operation Neptune's Web was a classified Coast Guard operation targeting high-level drug smuggling organizations. She knew about it only because she had security clearance and had been briefed on current operations. The fact that Santos knew about it suggested something far more complex than a simple drug bust. "Sir, how do you know about Operation Neptune's Web?" "Because, Commander, for the past 18 months, I have been working undercover for the Drug Enforcement Administration and Coast Guard intelligence to infiltrate the Ramirez cartel's smuggling operation. The words hit Martinez like a physical blow. She stared at Santos, trying to process what she had just heard. An undercover operation involving a legendary Coast Guard hero working deep cover for 18 months to infiltrate one of the most dangerous drug cartels on the West Coast. Sir, do you have any way to verify this claim? Santos reached slowly into his shirt pocket and withdrew a small waterproof case. Commander, inside this case is a secure satellite phone with a direct line to Coast Guard intelligence. The verification code is Hurricane Elena 77. When you call that number and provide that code, they will confirm my identity and mission status. Martinez took the case with trembling hands. If Santos was telling the truth, she was about to make contact with one of the most sensitive undercover operations in Coast Guard history. If he was lying, she was being manipulated by a very clever drug smuggler who had somehow obtained classified information. Rodriguez, she called out, maintain security on the suspects, but give me some privacy for a radio call. As her crew moved to the far end of the boat, Martinez opened the satellite phone and dialed the number Santos had provided. The connection was almost immediate. Coast Guard Intelligence Secure Line 7, came a crisp voice. This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, Commanding Officer of Cutter Vigilant. Verification code Hurricane Elena 77. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of typing. Commander Martinez, your verification is confirmed. What is your current status? I have in custody Captain Miguel Santos aboard the vessel Maria Elena, along with approximately 50 kilograms of suspected cocaine. Santos claims to be operating under DEA authorization as part of Operation Neptune's Web. Another pause, longer this time. Commander, please hold while I transfer you to the operation commander. Martinez felt her mouth go dry as she waited. Around her, the normal sounds of the ocean seemed amplified, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull, the cry of seagulls overhead, the distant rumble of the Vigilance engines. Commander Martinez, this is Captain Rebecca Walsh, Operation Neptune's Web. Can you confirm that Captain Santos is uninjured and his cover remains intact? Martinez looked at Santos, who was watching her intently. Yes, ma'am. He appears uninjured and his crew seems unaware of any problem. Outstanding. Commander, you have just intercepted the most important undercover operation on the West Coast. Captain Santos has been working for 18 months to get close to cartel leader Eduardo Ramirez. This shipment you've seized is intended to be his final proof of loyalty before Ramirez brings him into the inner circle. Martinez felt the world shift around her. Everything she thought she understood about this intercept had just changed completely. Ma'am, what are my orders? First, you need to make this look like a real bust. Santos will resist arrest, his crew will act appropriately scared, and you'll take them all into custody. But, Commander, the success of this operation and the lives of multiple undercover agents depend on maintaining his cover. Can I count on you and your crew? Martinez straightened her shoulders. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Good. Santos knows the protocol from here. Follow his lead, but remember that everything must appear completely legitimate to any observers who might be watching. The line went dead, leaving Martinez staring at the satellite phone. She looked up to find Santos watching her with those same calm, intelligent eyes that had made him a legend in the Coast Guard. Commander, he said quietly, I need you to arrest me now, and I need you to make it look real. The Coast Guard stopped the boat. But when the captain revealed his name, everyone stepped back. Martinez took a deep breath and nodded to Santos. The weight of what was happening settled over her like a heavy blanket. She was about to participate in one of the most complex undercover operations in Coast Guard history, and everything had to appear completely authentic. Rodriguez Johnson, approach the suspects, she called out in her most authoritative voice. We're placing all three under arrest for drug smuggling. Santos immediately began backing away, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that somehow managed to look both compliant and defiant. Commander, there must be some mistake. We are simple fishermen returning from a legitimate fishing expedition. Tell that to the 50 kilograms of cocaine we found in your fish hold, Martinez replied, playing her part. Miguel Santos, you are under arrest for possession, with intent to distribute controlled substances, conspiracy to import illegal drugs, and violation of maritime trafficking laws. Rodriguez approached with plastic zip-tie handcuffs, but Santos held up a hand. Wait, please. Commander, I need to speak with you privately before you make a serious mistake. Martinez could see the confusion on Rodriguez's face, but she needed to maintain the charade. You'll have plenty of time to talk at the Federal Detention Center. Rodriguez, secure the prisoner. As Rodriguez moved to restrain Santos, the older man suddenly spun and made a break for the side of the boat, as if attempting to dive overboard. Johnson quickly moved to intercept him, and the three men engaged in what looked like a genuine struggle. Santos was clearly allowing himself to be captured, but he made it look convincing, shouting protests in rapid Spanish. No, this is wrong. I am not who you think I am. I demand to speak with your superior officer. The performance was masterful. To anyone watching from a distance, it would appear that a desperate drug smuggler had been caught and was now frantically trying to escape justice. Martinez found herself impressed by Santos's ability to maintain his cover even in these circumstances. Within minutes, all three suspects were secured and loaded onto the rigid, inflatable boat for transport to the Vigilant. Martinez made sure that Santos was separated from his crew members, ostensibly for security reasons, but actually to allow them to coordinate their next moves. Once aboard the Coast Guard cutter, Martinez led Santos to the secure holding area. The moment the door closed behind them, the older man's demeanor changed completely. Gone was the frantic drug smuggler persona, replaced by the calm professionalism of an experienced law enforcement officer. Commander, how much do your crew members know about classified operations? Santos asked quietly. Rodriguez and Johnson have secret clearances, but they've never been briefed on Operation Neptune's Web, Martinez replied. They're good people, but they're confused about what just happened. Santos nodded thoughtfully. We need to brief them on the basics, but only the absolute minimum they need to know to maintain operational security. The story is that I'm a deep-cover DEA operative who's been infiltrating the Ramirez organization for 18 months. What about the cocaine? That's definitely real. Absolutely real, and worth approximately $2 million on the street. It was provided by the DEA as part of my cover identity. Eduardo Ramirez has been testing my loyalty by having me transport increasingly valuable shipments. This cocaine represents the final test before he brings me into his inner circle. Martinez shook her head in amazement. How did you get involved in this operation? According to your service record, you retired from the Coast Guard in 1998. Santos smiled grimly. I did retire, and I spent 15 years running a charter boat business in San Diego. But 2 years ago, the DEA approached me because they needed someone with extensive maritime experience to infiltrate Ramirez's operation. The man only trusts experienced sea captains, and he does extensive background checks on everyone who works for him. But the risk? Commander, Eduardo Ramirez is responsible for moving approximately 2 tons of cocaine and heroin into the United States every month. His organization has been linked to 17 murders, including 2 Coast Guard personnel who got too close to his operation. When the DEA asked for my help, I couldn't say no. Martinez felt a deep respect for the man sitting across from her. At 63 years old, Santos had volunteered for one of the most dangerous undercover assignments imaginable, working alone among some of the most violent criminals in North America. What happens now? She asked. Now comes the really difficult part. I need to convince Ramirez that this arrest was legitimate and that I managed to escape or was released due to lack of evidence. My crew members, Carlos and Fernando, are actually low-level cartel members, but they don't know my true identity. They think I'm exactly what I appear to be, an experienced smuggler. How do we make your escape look believable? Santos reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device that looked like a GPS unit. This is a tracking beacon. Once we're processed and transferred to federal holding, there will be a staged escape during transport. It will look like cartel members ambushed the transport vehicle and freed their associates. Martinez studied the device. The DEA has thought of everything. They've had to. One mistake, one inconsistency in my story, and I'm dead. Ramirez doesn't just kill people who betray him. He makes examples of them that last for days. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Rodriguez entered looking thoroughly confused and slightly concerned. "Commander, I've completed the preliminary search of the vessel. Besides the cocaine, we found standard fishing equipment, some personal belongings, and approximately $12,000 in cash hidden in the galley." "Any weapons?" "Negative, ma'am. But there was something else. I found these in the captain's quarters." Rodriguez handed Martinez a small wooden box containing several military medals, including what appeared to be a Coast Guard medal. Santos reached for the box with a pained expression. "Those belonged to my father. He served in the Coast Guard for 30 years, and those medals are all I have left of him." The story was perfectly crafted. Even if someone investigated Santos's background, they would find a legitimate family history of Coast Guard service, which would explain his knowledge of maritime operations without revealing his own service record. "Rodriguez," Martinez said carefully, "I need to brief you on some classified information. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room." For the next 20 minutes, Martinez explained the basic outline of Operation Neptune's web, emphasizing the critical importance of maintaining Santos's cover. Rodriguez listened with growing amazement as he realized the magnitude of what they had stumbled into. "So the arrest needs to look completely legitimate," Rodriguez confirmed. "Exactly. As far as official records are concerned, we arrested 3 drug smugglers with 50 kilograms of cocaine. The escape during transport will be reported as a failure of federal security, not a planned operation." Santos stood and began pacing the small room. "Commander, there's one more thing you need to know. Eduardo Ramirez has sources inside federal law enforcement. Not many, and we don't know who they are, but he somehow gets information about ongoing investigations." Martinez felt a chill. "What kind of information?" "Enough to stay one step ahead of most operations. He's been arrested 6 times in the past 10 years, and every case has fallen apart due to technical problems, missing evidence, or witnesses who disappear. So he might learn about this arrest." "He definitely will. In fact, I'm counting on it. My story will be that the Coast Guard arrested us during a routine patrol, but they didn't have enough evidence to make the charges stick. The escape will reinforce the idea that Ramirez has enough power to rescue his people from federal custody." Rodriguez shook his head in admiration. "Sir, how do you keep track of all these layers of deception?" Santos smiled sadly. "Petty officer, after 18 months of living with these people, the hardest part isn't remembering the lies. The hardest part is remembering who I really am." The 3 of them spent the next hour going over the details of the arrest report and the planned transfer to federal custody. Every aspect of the operation had to be documented in a way that would support Santos's cover story while still providing accurate intelligence to the DEA. As they worked, Martinez found herself thinking about the complexity of modern law enforcement. Here was a decorated Coast Guard hero, risking his life to infiltrate one of the most dangerous criminal organizations on the West Coast. And yet his success depended on making himself appear to be exactly the kind of criminal the Coast Guard was sworn to stop. "Commander," Santos said as they concluded their planning session, "I want you to know that I understand the position this puts you in. You've built your career on honesty and straightforward law enforcement. This operation requires you to participate in deception, even if it's for a good cause." Martinez considered his words carefully. "Captain Santos, in my 15 years of service, I've learned that sometimes the most important duty is the one that's hardest to perform. If helping you means keeping tons of drugs off the streets and saving lives, then I'm proud to be part of this operation." "Thank you, Commander." "That means more than you know." Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the ship's intercom. "Commander Martinez to the bridge. We have company approaching from the east." Martinez grabbed her binoculars and headed for the bridge, leaving Rodriguez to watch Santos. Through the bridge windows, she could see a sleek cigarette boat approaching at high speed, flying the Mexican flag. Her blood ran cold as she realized what this meant. "Captain Walsh warned me this might happen," Santos said quietly. He had followed her to the bridge despite being technically under arrest. "Ramirez sometimes has people watching when his shipments are supposed to arrive. If they see the arrest, it actually helps my cover story." Martinez watched the approaching boat through her binoculars. She could see 4 men on deck, and at least one of them was holding what appeared to be an assault rifle. "Are they likely to attack?" "No, they'll observe from a distance and report back to Ramirez. But, Commander, it's absolutely critical that they see me being treated as a genuine prisoner. If they suspect this is staged, everyone involved in the operation will be marked for death." Martinez understood. She immediately ordered Rodriguez to bring Santos back on deck in full restraints, making sure the performance was visible to the observers in the cigarette boat. For the next 30 minutes, they conducted what appeared to be an intensive interrogation of all 3 prisoners while the Mexican boat circled at a safe distance. The observers finally departed, apparently satisfied that they had witnessed a legitimate arrest. Martinez felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, but she knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when Santos attempted to convince Eduardo Ramirez that his arrest had been genuine, but that he had managed to escape or be released. "How do you think they'll report what they saw?" Martinez asked Santos as they returned below deck. "They'll tell Ramirez that the Coast Guard intercepted the Maria Elena and arrested all 3 crew members. They'll probably emphasize that we were caught with the cocaine, which will actually support my story that this was just bad luck, not betrayal. And when you escape during transport, Ramirez will see it as proof that he has enough power and resources to rescue his people from federal custody. It will increase his confidence in me, not reduce it." Martinez marveled at the psychological complexity of the operation. Every apparent setback was actually designed to strengthen Santos's position within the cartel. The arrest, the drugs, even the potential violence of the escape, all served to build his credibility as a ruthless and valuable member of Ramirez's organization. As evening approached, a federal transport vessel arrived to take custody of the prisoners. Martinez watched as Santos and his companions were transferred, knowing that within hours there would be a carefully orchestrated ambush that would free them and continue one of the most dangerous undercover operations in law enforcement history. "Commander," Santos said quietly as the federal agents prepared to escort him away, "if something goes wrong, if my cover is blown, I want you to know that it was worth the risk. What we learn from this operation will save lives." Martinez saluted him, a gesture of respect between 2 officers who understood the weight of duty. "Good luck, Captain Santos. Come home safe." As the transport vessel disappeared into the gathering darkness, Martinez stood on the deck of the Vigilant, knowing she had just participated in something that would remain classified for years to come. Somewhere out there, a Coast Guard hero was returning to one of the most dangerous assignments imaginable, carrying the hopes of law enforcement and the trust of those who understood the true price of keeping their communities safe. The Coast Guard stopped the boat, but when the captain revealed his name, everyone stepped back. 3 months after the intercept, Lieutenant Commander Martinez received a secure message that would change her understanding of courage forever. The message was brief, but carried enormous weight. Operation Neptune's Web successfully concluded. Captain Santos extracted safely. Ramirez organization dismantled. 17 arrests. 2 tons narcotics seized. Your assistance was vital to mission success. Martinez stared at the message, remembering that evening when she watched the federal transport vessel disappear into the darkness. She had wondered countless times whether Santos had survived his return to the cartel, whether the elaborate deception had held up under scrutiny, and whether the sacrifices made by everyone involved had been worth the risk. The full story emerged gradually over the following weeks through classified briefings and secure communications. The staged escape had worked perfectly. DEA agents posing as cartel members had ambushed the transport vehicle on a lonely stretch of highway outside San Diego, using flashbang grenades and smoke to create a convincing scene of violence without actually endangering anyone. Santos and his 2 companions had been rescued and returned to Eduardo Ramirez, who welcomed them as heroes who had survived federal interrogation without betraying the organization. The cocaine seizure was explained as an unfortunate accident, the kind of random bad luck that occasionally struck even the most careful smuggling operations. But Santos's real work had just begun. Armed with Ramirez's complete trust and a position within the cartel's inner circle, he spent the next 3 months documenting the organization's entire structure. He identified suppliers in Colombia, money laundering operations in the Caribbean, distribution networks throughout California, and corrupt officials who provided protection for cartel activities. The information Santos gathered was extraordinary in its scope and detail. He documented meetings between Ramirez and other cartel leaders, recorded conversations about planned shipments, and photographed evidence that would later be used in dozens of prosecutions. Most importantly, he identified the sources inside federal law enforcement who had been providing information to the cartel. The operation's climax came on a Tuesday morning when simultaneous raids struck 17 locations across California, Mexico, and Colombia. Eduardo Ramirez was arrested at his heavily fortified compound outside Tijuana, along with 43 members of his organization. The raids netted 2 tons of cocaine and heroin, $12 million in cash, and enough evidence to guarantee life sentences for the organization's leadership. Santos's extraction had been the most dangerous part of the entire operation. As federal agents closed in on the cartel's compounds, he had to disappear without arousing suspicion. The DEA staged a boat accident off the coast of Baja California, complete with debris and an oil slick, leading everyone to believe that Captain Miguel Santos had drowned while attempting to flee the raids. In reality, Santos had been picked up by a Coast Guard submarine and taken to a secure location where he spent 6 weeks in debriefing sessions, helping federal prosecutors understand the intelligence he had gathered. The psychological toll of 18 months undercover among violent criminals had been enormous, and Santos required extensive counseling to readjust to normal life. Martinez learned these details during a classified briefing held at Coast Guard headquarters 6 months after the operation concluded. She sat in a secure conference room with other officers who had played roles in Operation Neptune's Web, listening as Admiral Richardson outlined the operation's impact. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Admiral said, "Operation Neptune's Web represents one of the most successful infiltration operations in Coast Guard history. The intelligence gathered by Captain Santos led to the disruption of a criminal organization responsible for importing approximately 24 tons of illegal drugs into the United States over the past 5 years. The Admiral clicked to the next slide in his presentation, showing a map covered with red dots representing arrests and seizures. The ripple effects of this operation are still being felt. Information provided by Captain Santos has led to ongoing investigations in 12 countries and has identified criminal networks that we didn't even know existed." Martinez raised her hand. "Sir, what is Captain Santos's current status?" Admiral Richardson smiled. Captain Santos is alive and well, though his identity and location remain classified for security reasons. He has been awarded the Coast Guard Medal for Valor, making him one of only 3 people in service history to receive this decoration twice. He has also received commendations from the DEA, FBI, and several international law enforcement agencies. The briefing continued with details about the legal proceedings against the arrested cartel members. Eduardo Ramirez had been convicted on 47 counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His organization's financial network had been dismantled, with over $30 million in assets seized and returned to the communities damaged by drug trafficking. But perhaps the most significant impact of Operation Neptune's Web was its effect on cartel operations along the entire West Coast. The detailed intelligence gathered by Santos revealed operational methods, communication systems, and recruitment patterns that allowed law enforcement agencies to anticipate and disrupt criminal activities before they could be completed. The success of this operation, Admiral Richardson concluded, demonstrates the extraordinary dedication of Coast Guard personnel to their mission of protecting American waters and communities. Captain Santos's courage, Commander Martinez's professionalism, and the discretion shown by all personnel involved exemplify the highest traditions of our service. After the briefing, Martinez found herself thinking about the complexity of modern law enforcement and the sacrifices made by people whose names would never be known to the public. Santos had risked everything to infiltrate one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in North America, living for 18 months among people who would have killed him without hesitation if they had discovered his true identity. She also thought about the moral ambiguities involved in such operations. Santos had been forced to participate in criminal activities, to earn the trust of violent men, and to maintain a false identity that required him to act against everything he believed in. The psychological cost of such work was enormous, and Martinez wondered how many other law enforcement officers were making similar sacrifices in operations she would never know about. A year later, Martinez received an unexpected visitor at Coast Guard Station San Pedro. A man in his mid-60s wearing civilian clothes and carrying a small package approached the security gate and asked to speak with her. When she arrived at the gate, she immediately recognized the calm, intelligent eyes she remembered from that day on the Maria Elena. "Captain Santos," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Actually, Commander, these days I'm just Miguel Garcia, retired charter boat captain from San Diego," he replied with a slight smile. "But I wanted to thank you personally for what you did that day." They walked to a quiet area near the harbor where they could speak privately. Santos looked older than Martinez remembered, and she could see the toll that 18 months undercover had taken on him. But there was also a sense of peace in his demeanor that hadn't been there during the operation. "How are you adjusting to civilian life?" Martinez asked. "Better than I expected. The DEA has provided excellent support, including counseling and a new identity. I'm actually back to running charter fishing trips, which is what I was doing before this whole adventure began." Santos handed her the package he had been carrying. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a framed photograph of the Coast Guard cutter Resolute during the Hurricane Elena rescue operation in 1985. The image showed the cutter battling enormous waves as it approached the sinking cruise ship, with Santos visible on the bridge directing the rescue efforts. "I thought you might like to have a reminder that sometimes the most important missions are the ones that require us to risk everything for people we'll never meet," Santos said. Martinez studied the photograph, thinking about the parallels between the hurricane rescue and Operation Neptune's Web. In both cases, Santos had risked his life to save others, whether from natural disaster or from the destruction caused by drug trafficking. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Martinez said. "Was it worth it? The 18 months undercover, the psychological cost, the danger?" Santos looked out across the harbor, watching a Coast Guard patrol boat returning from its daily mission. "Commander, during my time with the Ramirez organization, I saw what drugs do to communities. I saw children recruited as runners, families destroyed by addiction, and violence that seemed to have no end. If our operation prevented even a small fraction of that suffering, then yes, it was worth it." They talked for another hour, sharing stories about Coast Guard service and discussing the challenges facing modern law enforcement. Santos spoke about his plans for the future, which included volunteer work with organizations helping former addicts rebuild their lives. "There's something else I wanted to tell you," Santos said as their conversation neared its end. "The Coast Guard is considering declassifying certain aspects of Operation Neptune's Web for use in training materials. Your handling of the intercept will be used as a case study in how to manage complex, sensitive operations under pressure." Martinez felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had simply done her duty, following orders and supporting a mission she believed in. But she understood that her decisions that day had contributed to one of the most successful law enforcement operations in Coast Guard history. As Santos prepared to leave, he turned back with one final comment. "Commander, in all my years of service, I learned that the most important quality in a Coast Guard officer isn't courage or intelligence or even experience. It's the ability to do the right thing when the situation is complicated and the stakes are high. You demonstrated that quality perfectly." After he left, Martinez returned to her duties, but the conversation stayed with her throughout the day. She thought about the dozens of Coast Guard personnel who carried out dangerous missions every day, often without recognition or public acknowledgement. She thought about the complexity of modern threats and the sophisticated responses required to address them. Most of all, she thought about Captain Miguel Santos, a man who had become a legend twice in his career, first for his heroic rescue work and then for his undercover operation against the Ramirez cartel. His story reminded her why she had chosen to serve in the Coast Guard and why that service remained important in an increasingly complex world. The photograph from the Hurricane Elena rescue now hangs in Martinez's office, serving as a daily reminder that the most meaningful missions often require extraordinary sacrifice from ordinary people who choose to serve something greater than themselves. And sometimes, when young Coast Guard officers ask her about leadership and duty, she tells them the story of the day she stopped a fishing boat and discovered that heroism can take many different forms, but always requires the courage to do what's right, regardless of the personal cost.